And now, a passage from The Story of the New York State Canals. Governor DeWitt Clinton's Dream. As a bond of union between the Atlantic and Western states, it may prevent the dismemberment of the American empire. As an organ of communication between the Hudson, the Mississippi, the St. Lawrence, the Great Lakes of the North and West, and their tributary rivers, it will create the greatest inland trade ever witnessed. The most fertile and extensive regions of America will avail themselves of its facilities for a market. All their surplus productions, whether of the soil, the forest, the mines, or the water, their fabrics of art, and their supplies of foreign commodities, will concentrate in the city of New York, for transportation abroad or consumption at home. Agriculture, manufactures, commerce, trade, navigation, and the arts will receive a correspondent encouragement. The city will, in the course of time, become the granary of the world, the emporium of commerce, the seat of manufactures, the focus of great moneyed operations, and the concentrating point of vast disposable and accumulating capitals, which will stimulate, enliven, extend, and reward the exertions of human labor and ingenuity in all their processes and exhibitions. And before the revolution of a century, the whole island of Manhattan, covered with inhabitants and replenished with a dense population, will constitute one vast city. Such was Clinton's dream concerning the original Erie Canal, the canal which seems so small to us now, but which was the grand canal of our forefathers, the canal which for many years was the model for canal building throughout the world. The canal which more than any other single agency was responsible for the unprecedented development and prosperity that came not alone to New York State, but to the states beyond its western border, and even to the whole country in the first half of the 19th century. When Clinton wrote these words, they seemed to many as the vain imaginings of a most visionary dreamer. But the dream came true, and every loyal New Yorker has reason to feel pride in what the canals have done for his state. The history of transportation reads much the same in all lands. First came the highways, then the waterways, and later the railways. But in America, which was not settled until the waterways of Europe had been in use for years, the opening of waterways closely followed the cutting of roads through the wilderness, and in turn the railroads antedated the canals by only a short time. These are circumstances which have given to America a peculiar history of rapid development. Our early highways were few and poor, and to travel over them was very costly and beset with difficulties. Waterways had been improved for the benefit of the people of foreign lands, and accordingly progressive minds in America were busy with plans for like improvements here. George Washington, a surveyor and an engineer before he became a soldier and a statesman, was acclaimed by early writers as the father of American canals. Before the Revolutionary War, he had succeeded so far as to obtain official sanction for one of his projected plans. At the close of the war, but before peace was declared, he started from his headquarters at Newburgh and made a journey through central New York, especially to view the possibilities for inland navigation. The first waterway improvements in New York were made by a private company chartered in 1791. Within 5 or 6 years, the natural streams had been improved so as to facilitate traffic to a considerable extent. But the need of something better was felt, although the people were not then ready to commence the great undertaking which the situation demanded. The population west of the Genesee Valley and even farther west was small, not because those sections of the state were not fertile and attractive, but people were slow to go far inland, where the bringing in of supplies and the carrying out of products could be accomplished only at heavy expense and with great risk. In order to open the western country to settlers and to offer a cheap and safe way to carry produce to a market, determined efforts were made to provide for the construction of a canal across the state. It was generally recognized that such a canal was greatly needed, but the magnitude of the undertaking and the doubt of the state's ability to cope with the difficulties developed much strong opposition. For years the project struggled along before sufficient public sentiment could be aroused to demand its fulfillment, and it was not until 1817 that the state actually undertook the construction of this canal. In those early days, it was often referred to in derision as Clinton's Big Ditch. This waterway, called the Erie Canal and famous the world over, was opened October 26, 1825. It was 4 feet deep and 40 feet wide, and at the beginning floated boats carrying 30 tons of freight. The first fleet to travel its full length was headed by the boat Seneca Chief, bearing Governor Clinton, the lieutenant governor, and a company of distinguished citizens. The start from Buffalo on the morning of October 26th was accompanied by the firing of a cannon, and this was echoed by the booming of a line of cannons stationed at suitable intervals all the way across the state to Albany and down the Hudson to New York City. A grand salute from a battery 500 miles long announcing to the people of the state the completion of the most stupendous undertaking of their time. The Seneca Chief bore 2 barrels of water from Lake Erie, which Governor Clinton emptied into the ocean at New York in a formal ceremony generally referred to as the marriage of the waters between the Great Lakes and the Atlantic Ocean. The Erie proved to be America's greatest canal. Its effect was soon felt not only through the state, but throughout the East and the Great Lakes region. Settlers flocked westward, forests gave way to sawmills and hamlets, and these in turn grew into villages. Prosperous towns were established on the Great Lakes, and a splendid chain of cities sprang up along the line of the Erie Canal. At a time when we have ceased to wonder at great engineering feats which furnish this continent with the means of rapid and easy transportation, it is difficult to realize the conditions that prevailed in America a century ago. We are likely to forget the magnitude of the undertaking, which was the chief instrument in retaining for New York the proud title of the Empire State. We lose sight of the tremendous difficulties overcome and the strenuous efforts exerted by the men who gave to the state her canal policy. When we recognize the many adverse conditions and review the difficulties, we do not wonder that the people of the struggling republic stood aghast at the vast enterprise and were slow to begin improvements which have proved to be the making of the state. It is well that at that period that were men guiding the interests of the canals who had a strong faith in their ultimate success and who clearly foresaw the benefits follow. To their energy, bravery, perseverance, and dauntless resolution is due the era of prosperity and development which followed the building of the canal. The writer of the New York Memorial, the chief instrument to mold public sentiment for the early canal, was gifted with prophecy when he said, "It remains for a free state to create a new era in history and to erect a work more stupendous, more magnificent, and more beneficial than has heretofore been achieved by the human race." After the building of the original canal, the city of New York grew by leaps and bounds. Before the canal was built, Philadelphia had been the nation's chief seaport, but New York soon took the lead, and too late Philadelphia made heroic but futile efforts to regain its supremacy. Massachusetts had been another rival, having been about on a par with New York State in exports, but 16 years after the opening of the canal, its exports were only 1/3 those of New York. In that period, too, the value of real estate in New York increased more rapidly than the population, while personal property was nearly 4 times its former value, and manufacturing 3 times as great. There were then 5 times as many people following commercial pursuits in New York as there were before the completion of the Erie Canal. So marked was the success of the Erie Canal that a veritable frenzy for canal building spread over the whole country, which manifested itself in New York State in the surveying of hundreds of miles of proposed routes, and in the building of several lateral canals, 6 within the first decade after the Erie was completed, and 4 more within the next 4 years. In order to keep pace with the growing demands of traffic, the Erie and its main branches were enlarged from time to time. In 1862, the Erie Canal had a depth of 7 feet. It could handle boats carrying 240 tons, a large increase over the first boats of 30 tons capacity on the original canal. Up to 1882, the year in which it was made a free canal by the abolition of tolls, it had earned $42 million over and above its original cost and the expense of enlargement, maintenance, and operation. In 1903, almost 90 years after the beginning of Clinton's Canal, the people of the state decided again to enlarge it by the construction of what has been generally termed the Barge Canal. Before the state of New York entered upon the Barge Canal project, the relative merits of ship and barge canals were most carefully considered by various federal and state boards of engineers. As a result of the study by these eminent engineers, the conclusion was reached that a barge canal rather than a ship canal would best serve the interests of navigation and commerce between the Great Lakes and the ocean. It was shown that vessels built for ocean service could not be operated to advantage either in the Great Lakes or in a long narrow channel connecting the Great Lakes with the Atlantic seaboard, that the capacity of a ship canal for handling freight would not greatly exceed the capacity of a barge canal, and that it would be cheaper to transfer cargoes at the ends of the canal and move freight across the state in barges than it would be to attempt to navigate ocean-going vessels through a narrow channel of such great length. It was upon this determination that the state of New York bonded itself for the purpose of constructing the barge canal. The barge canal consists of the Erie Canal and the three chief branches of the state system: the Champlain, the Oswego, and the Cayuga and Seneca canals. The Erie is the main line and reaches across the state from Troy on the Hudson River to Tonawanda and Buffalo on the Niagara River. The Champlain runs north near the easterly boundary of the state, from Troy to Whitehall at the southern end of Lake Champlain. The Oswego, from a point near Syracuse, connects the Erie Canal with Lake Ontario, and the Cayuga and Seneca Canal, which leaves the Erie west of Syracuse, runs southward, connecting with Cayuga and Seneca lakes. The Erie Canal is about 340 miles in length, the Champlain 63 miles, the Oswego 24 miles, and the Cayuga and Seneca 27 miles. Including with these the Hudson River and the lakes connected with the canal at various points and actually forming part of the system, the total length of the barge canal system is a little more than 800 miles. The barge canal is a great improvement in the way of inland waterway navigation and has been pronounced by many eminent authorities to be one of the greatest engineering works of the present age, rivaling from an engineering viewpoint the work done by the government at Panama. It is 10 times as long as the Panama Canal, it has many more structures than the Panama, and some of its structures are the most notable in the world. The burden of constructing this, the world's greatest waterway system, devolved upon the state engineer and his corps of assistants. Not only did this department make the original surveys and estimates and prepare the designs, plans, and specifications, but it also had supervision and direction over all construction work. The system differs from the canals previously built in that the underlying idea has been to use the lowest watercourses in the valleys wherever possible, rather than to build an artificial channel along the higher ground. From Troy to Rome, the barge canal is largely in the Mohawk River, the old canal which paralleled the Mohawk having been abandoned and the river made into a canal. West of Rome, the canal passes through Oneida Lake and the Oneida River, thence through the Seneca and Clyde rivers to a point near the city of Rochester. From that city westward, it has been necessary to build an artificial channel or landline canal to a point west of Lockport. From there, westward to the Niagara River, Tonawanda Creek is used. From Tonawanda, traffic proceeds to Buffalo by way of the Niagara River. On the Oswego branch, the Oswego River has been canalized to Lake Ontario. The Cayuga and Seneca branch is partly river canalization and partly artificial channel. The southerly portion of the Champlain Canal is a canalization of the Hudson River. The northerly part occupies Wood Creek Valley, but does not follow the windings of the stream. From tidewater level at Troy, the Erie Canal rises through a series of locks in the Mohawk Valley to elevation 420 feet above sea level at the summit level at Rome. Going westward, it descends to elevation 363 at the junction with the Oswego Canal, and thence rises to elevation 565.6 at the Niagara River. The Oswego Canal descends to Lake Ontario, the mean elevation of which is 244.4. The Champlain Canal ascends from tidewater at Troy to elevation 140 at the summit level, and thence descends to elevation 96.5 at the entrance to Lake Champlain. The Cayuga and Seneca Canal has a total lift of 71 feet. The channel of the waterway has a uniform bottom width of 75 feet in earth sections of the landline, 94 feet where solid rock was encountered, and 200 feet or more in the beds of rivers and lakes. The depth of the canal is 12 feet. The locks along the rivers and those on the land lines are of similar design and standard dimensions. The maximum usable width and length are 44.5 and 300 feet respectively, with a depth of 12 feet over the miter sills.